Right, it's Confessions time. Thank you for downloading the latest Confessions podcast. You'll be astonished at what's coming up from the very sinful Radio 2 listener, or 4 listeners in this case. What we have coming up, some troublesome travellers, a postal phantom. Now, that really doesn't work, does it? I mean, it's 2 P's, but it's a different sound. This is phonetics, and that I apologise. A terrifying tea tale, that's better, and some sisterly subterfuge. That works. See what you make of the stories. My confession dates back to the summer of 2001 when I was visiting the fine city of Paris with my girlfriend at the time. After a day of wandering around the usual attractions, and as a then student of Durham University eating enough cheese to develop sweats, we decided to take a train to Louis XIV's sumptuous gilded Palace of Versailles. Personally, I was never the biggest fan of visiting stately homes with their red ropes and ploughman's lunches, but this one did have the Hall of Mirrors, which I remembered from school history lessons and hoped that it had something to do with a war. Yeah, thanks. The local SNCF train from Montparnasse was to take 40 minutes, shuffling through the city with assorted commuters. Across the aisle from us were a family of American tourists. Picture, if you remember them, the Griswolds from the National Lampoon's European Vacation, only bigger and with more bum bags. If you saw this film, it was Chevy Chase playing the kind of an American family. They kind of
it's very funny.
Didn't really know very much. There's a scene where they're all on the steps outside a gallery, and he says, "Hurry up! It closes in 15 minutes. We've got 10,000 works of art to see." It's that kind of thing. The peace of the rolling train carriage was continually shattered by their loud exclamations about how terrible the customer service had been at Heathrow and how unacceptably unlike Ohio rural France appeared to be. You get my drift. A sudden start of the train knocked over little Rusty Griswold's bucket of Pepsi, spilling ice and sticky brown cola all over the aisle, most of which ended up being soaked up by my bag under the table. The parents shouted at their son for wasting their money and carried on with their conversation as commuters tiptoed through the cola lake at each stop of the train. Apparently, after Versailles, they would see all of Paris by the end of the afternoon, and then they'd be off to Milan to do Italy in a day, or so they thought. In a rare moment of silence, we noticed that the train had been stopped at a deserted suburban station for several minutes. A message was broadcast over the tinny intercom system, which prompted everyone to get up and exit the train. Now, Simon, I must confess that my GCSE French teacher, Mr. Topper, had spent a great deal of time teaching us about le café de rêve and how to buy fruit in La Rochelle, but hadn't deemed it necessary to give us the words for replacement bus service. My girlfriend, who'd been to a much more fancy school in Hertfordshire and who was studying modern languages, kindly explained to me as we walked between the seats towards the exit. As the last person to get off the train, I was halfway through the sliding doors when from behind me there was a shout, and if you could do this in your best Midwestern American accent, Simon.
Go on.
Well, it's kind of like bog standard American.
Yeah,
but
no, I'm looking forward to this.
Speaking French. Excuse me, pardon me, monsieur.
What?
Where y'all going?
The y'all. That's about the only bit of that that works.
Where y'all going? Where you heading?
That's pretty good.
Thank you. Feeling the squelchy Coke now dripping from my bag down my back, I explained to the American man that regular commuter tickets needed to be validated when they crossed into the next fare zone, so everyone was running up the stairs to get the ticket stamped before the train left again. As tourists, though, from America, they were fine with what they had. They didn't have to move at all. No need to move, you just stay there. Hey, merci, he said, mistaking my English accent for something French. Casually, he appeared to roll his eyes at yet another sign of French infrastructural incompetence and slumped back down into his seat. As we climbed the stairs from the platform, I was justifying this all in my head, that they would work it out eventually. But at that point there was a beeping sound, the doors closed, and the train eased away from the platform back in the direction we'd come from, all the way back to Paris, non-stop. So I would clearly need to ask forgiveness, not from the Griswold family, who, had they made it to Versailles, wouldn't have appreciated the decadent styling of the Grand Gallery anyway, but from the... excuse me. But from the people of France, for misrepresenting them and putting...
Go on, power through.
Hang on. Have a bit of Vivaldi. Hang on.
I'm having a bit of a deja vu here.
But from the people of France for misrepresenting them and putting further strain on the Franco-American relationship. Lots of love, James, now living in the United States of America. Well, it's a tale of the Americans abroad. Well, one particular American family abroad, not Americans abroad at all, just one particular family, and how they got stuck in a train because they thought France wasn't enough like Ohio. What do you think, Sister Rebecca?
I think it's a bit mean of James, actually. I think that they were, obviously they're American and they don't know France very well. They probably didn't realise how big France is and how big Italy is. And their one crime was that the son's cola spilt. Is that right? So I think, to punish them
and they were
with
loud.
and they were loud. But come on, lots of people are loud. I just think that was a bit much, really. To punish them by sending them back to Paris was over the top. So I'm not forgiving.
Well, it's a very interesting take. Yeah, you have a good point, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Sister Bobby from the Pirate.
Yeah, I'm with Rebecca. I think it was really, really, really mean. And also, of course, the real victims are Italy, because they lost all the money from the tourists, didn't they? And they could do with all the money they can possibly get.
Do you think? Is that your perception? Is Italy going down the tubes now? Is that
because, it's one of those things where you're right. I think it was really, really mean. It's completely over the top. So, James, unforgiven.
Well, it's not looking very good for James so far. What do you think, Matinee Matt?
I'm inclined to... I mean, obviously, the idea, well, let's all have a good old laugh about our American cousins and how uncultured they are and how they can't cope with museums, and they think that going to Milan for the day means they've seen Italy. However, I have been in that position, and I think I'd have done the same. I would have said, you just stay on the train, sonny Jim, we're all just getting off for no reason.
Is that right?
Yes, so I'm definitely going to forgive.
I think that I did the Uffizi Gallery in Florence in an hour.
Well, you obviously didn't.
You did it.
Well, it was that or nothing. It was that or nothing.
You ran through
that
it.
Or
That's
nothing.
all you did.
What did you say? I'm not going to go in. I only had an hour. I could have sat and eaten chips, or I could have gone to the Uffizi Gallery.
You could just go to 2 pictures in an hour. You don't do a gallery in an hour.
Okay. You telling me off?
Yeah, I am.
Hey, thanks. Father Mayo and co. The problem with confessing is that I'm afraid it's going to open the door to revenge and retribution. And that is going to... As soon as I bare my soul, I've kept stum for years, and now I fear I'm going to be in trouble. About 9 years ago, my lovely daughter Lucy and her boyfriend Craig decided to buy a small flat and move in together. My wife and I were delighted, as Craig was so much better than some of the dross.
You're in trouble now.
That she'd previously brought home.
That's true.
And he had a decent career in travel. And I can assure you that the discounts and upgrades that he could get us on holidays didn't influence us at all. As with many young couples, starting out, they furnished the flat as best they could. We tried to help a bit and bought them a nice new vacuum cleaner. And Craig's parents bought them something equally dull. Dull but useful.
Yeah.
Once they were settled, we went along to congratulate them and joined in the excitement. As we sat down with a glass of wine, a very excited Lucy started to show us some of the many cards that they'd received that were now displayed over every surface. Having done the vacuum cleaner bit, we hadn't really bothered with the card, and looking around, neither had anyone else from our side of the family. In fact, nearly every card was from someone on Craig's side of the family, which, it must be said, was substantially larger than ours. So it wasn't like we didn't care or anything, but we did look as though we were tight. And we were suitably embarrassed. Lucy was pointing out how lovely and generous some of Craig's relis had been. What with Auntie Joan sending £20 of store vouchers that she couldn't really afford, and that £10 note from his granny, not to mention various kitchen gadgets and homeware that had been donated. Craig's family really was so kind and supportive. For the next week or so, rarely a day went by without an update on the latest offerings from Craig's extended family. Little presents, big presents, cheques from far-flung corners of the earth, and cards by the 100. It just seemed never-ending and just a little embarrassing, as our lot had totally failed them. Including the Hoover, the contribution from our side amounted to actually just a Hoover. I suppose I started to get a little bit tired and peeved hearing of more cards and gifts, and how they were running out of space. So I decided to join in the fun and went out during my lunch break and bought a "Congratulations on your new home" card to add to their collection. I remember well. It was a really cheap and nasty one, very thin and flimsy with bits of glitter, just the sort that some elderly old relative might have bought. Back in my office, in my best shaky old person's handwriting, I wrote a message to the couple. Well done on your new home. Please use this to buy a little something from us. Sorry it's not much. And then I randomly decided to pick names. I signed it from Uncle Ted and Auntie Margaret with a kiss and put in a very, very crumpled and battered £5 note. Job done. Well, not quite. Rather than send it from the same town where we all lived, I decided to ask a colleague to post it for me from where she lived, a good 50 miles away near Maidstone in Kent. This she did, and in doing so removed any chance of it being traced back to me, and practically guaranteed that my harmless little joke would totally bamboozle them. Only my wife knew the true identity of the hoaxer. Well, a few days later I got a call from Ben, my son. He'd just bumped into Craig in a local hardware store and had phoned to say that he looked worryingly pale, very distant and not his usual self. He said he asked Craig what was wrong. And although Craig insisted all was fine, he pressed him out of concern, eventually coaxing him into telling a rather remarkable story. Apparently, he and Lucy had received yet another card in the post, this time enclosing a crumpled fiver, and that it was signed by an Uncle Ted and an Auntie Margaret and had a Maidstone postmark. You must be doing pretty well with all the contributions you've had, Ben had commented, but Craig said no, this was different and very weird, and went on to tell Ben that he did indeed have an Uncle Ted and an Auntie Margaret. But they had sadly died.
Oh, no!
2 years previously. The elderly couple's last home had been 50 miles away in Maidstone in Kent. Well, blow me down, Father Simon. How was I to know that I'd managed to randomly pick the only two names that would have caused Craig and his family so much amazement by getting a card and a fiver from beyond the grave? Knowing me better than most, Ben had guessed that it was probably me behind it. You better get on to Craig and come clean, Dad, he said. Apparently the whole family have now seen the letter and are in shock. They knew that Auntie Margaret had a keen interest in the seance type thing and had delved into the paranormal when she was alive, but were totally freaked out by the way that she'd made contact from the other side through Royal Mail. As you do if you're dead. Yeah. A year or so later, Lucy and Craig were due to be married. On the night of Craig's stag do, Craig and I were the last men standing. And as we were propping up the hotel bar, with Craig looking very fetching dressed as an Oompa Loompa, I decided to come clean and admitted my role in the phantom resurrection of his deceased uncle and aunt. I thought it was only fair that he should know what sort of family he was marrying into. Lucy and Craig's wedding was a fantastic day for both families. In the centre of the marquee, there were a table full of gifts and messages from all their friends and relatives, with one notable exception. But please forgive me, I have no defence whatsoever, but for what it's worth, I'm an avid Spurs fan. Anyway, I can't see what that's got to do with anything.
Doesn't help, though,
Joe, I don't know what the chances are of that happening, but anyway, he just picked on the names and the location. Ted and Margaret, who'd have thought? What do you
That's
think?
amazing. As you say, what a coincidence. What I didn't quite understand was what the intention of the practical joke was, if they were just getting a random Uncle Ted and Auntie Margaret. Were they just supposed to be confusing them? I don't know, I don't really get that. But anyway, what a coincidence. And I was going to not forgive when I thought that Joe hadn't fessed up, but he did tell Craig, so I think it was quite funny in the end. I don't know whether Craig told Lucy, maybe not. Maybe this is the first that Lucy will be hearing of it, but I'm going to forgive because he did fess up. Exactly.
I would imagine that the original intention was just to cause
confusion.
Who is this? We haven't got an Uncle Ted and an Auntie Margaret. Hey, what do you think, Dean?
Well, if Ben guessed, I bet Lucy did too, as well, if the truth were known. And the chances are slim, I admit, of those names coming up, but it was a risk he took, really. It was a lot of trouble to wind up Lucy and Craig, and I think just basically it was a poor gag.
Oh, it's a pretty good gag.
Well, it turned out to be a good gag.
Well,
inadvertently.
It's hilarious, Deadly, and you know it. Stop being difficult.
I can't forgive. I can't forgive on this occasion.
Brother Matthew, what do you say?
It never ends. So we've got to give gifts for people moving in now. We get gifts for moving, gifts for getting engaged, gifts for getting married. They're going to want gifts for the kids. They're going to want gifts at Christmas and birth. It never ends. Who are these people who are sending gifts all the time just because they've moved in together?
Friends and family.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and making life intolerable for the rest of us. So for that, I am not going to forgive, because I am not up for this. Something has slightly changed in your life, therefore you deserve a store voucher. No.
You've had a new haircut.
I have.
Here's a present. Tonight's tale comes from Wavy Davy. Thank you, Wavy Davy. Dear forgiving threesome and Matt.
Yeah.
Let me take you back to the life of a 14-year-old boy in Newcastle in the early 1980s, where, yes, there was wood chip on the walls, and no, we didn't notice it at all. Well, certainly my brother Richard didn't, as he fulfilled what Matt will no doubt call his older sibling duty of taunting and baiting me mercilessly.
Yep, that's fair enough. Absolutely, yep.
Okay, there you go. You're absolutely right, Wavy Davy. And although he didn't need one, Richard had a new game to play at my expense. The "How many amusing comments can I make about David's shiny new dental brace" game. And then he writes, "Stand back, guys. Here comes Simon's attempt at a Geordie accent.
Oh, excellent. Here
Sadly,
it comes. No,
no.
here it comes, everyone.
What's David's favourite..." No, I'm not going to do it because it's patronising and insulting.
Okay.
Can you do it, Matt?
No, I can't. Sadly, can you do it, Rebecca? That would be
Absolutely
great
not.
if you
No,
could.
no, no, no.
Yeah.
What about you, Bobby?
Yes.
Can you do it?
No.
No. Well,
Oh,
let's just go with
pretend that
plain
it
Mayo
didn't
speak.
happen. Yeah.
So, he's playing his Let's Get My Brother. What's David's favourite children's TV show? Answer, Metal Mickey. Who's David's favourite footballer? Answer, Paul Bracewell.
Oh, very good.
Who's David's favourite Bond villain? Well, you can work that one out for yourselves. Well, how he laughed, and I didn't. Richard's favourite of favourites was to say to any of my friends who popped in and accepted a warming cup of tea, "That'll be the cup David dips his brace in. Cue much retching, miming of vomiting, swift departures and infrequent returns." I, on the other hand, only had eyes, at this time, for the sumptuous Sheila. Oh, yes. Name changed for alliterative purposes. Again echoing Jarvis's astounding prescience, Sheila never noticed me at all, despite the fact that I was the only one permanently wearing a plastic gum shield with a metal ring around my teeth. However, our groups of friends did overlap. And one day, I found myself sitting on the school wall and within earshot when Sheila announced that she was going to be a hairdresser and she was requesting volunteer models. Now, either the rest of my gang were blind to Sheila's charms or had some inkling that haircutting wasn't going to be her speciality, or just weren't as clearly desperate as me. Nobody volunteered until I thought nonchalantly shouted, Me! I'll do it! Please let it be me! Stroke my hair, cut my hair, feel my parting!" Anyway, obviously mumbling like Marlon Brando with a mouthful of wasps, it took a few attempts to get the message across, but we got there eventually and a date was set. What's up, Matt? What's up?
I think we all know. So
What?
Let's move on.
Just
Let's
'cause
move on. Just move on.
I'm just doing it in my normal voice. I hope that's acceptable to everybody. Which is how I found myself making 3 cups of tea. A chair, a towel and scissors were set up in the good room, and the scrumptious Sheila sat opposite my brother in the living room, being forced to listen to Richard's jokes. And of course, as I searched for the spoon, I could hear that fateful refrain, "He'll probably give you the cup he dips his brace in, you know." At which point, the ill-fitting brace in question slipped fortuitously from my mouth, or I may have wedged it out using a knife. But anyway, these details have been lost in the clouds of history. Well, what would you have done? Revenge? I think so. There was some comeuppance to be had, some own petards to be hoisted. Gently, holding the brace by the wire retainer, I gave the palate a quick dip in Richard's tea, and then a very slow, leisurely dunk. The saliva slid
Disgusting.
slowly into the tea, as did a few flakes of digestive biscuit I had just consumed.
Even better.
I dropped off their cups and returned to the kitchen, smirking through my now comfortably warm brace. Well, we'd all been sitting there for a couple of minutes, me trying not to look at Richard, the cup, or the scrumptious Sheila, just wallowing in my sweet revenge, until this happened. Richard says, "You haven't put any sugar in my tea, you useless person." Thing is, I had. I definitely 100% had. Then Sheila sips her tea. "You give me the one with sugar in, Davy. I wondered why it tasted so strange." No! That's a whole line, capital N, capital O, and lots of exclamation marks. No! Richard refused to swap, and Sheila and I proceeded to the haircutting stage, her with a great deal of enthusiasm and very little else. All throughout the process, I could barely look at Sheila in the knowledge of the betrayal and possible poisoning I had inflicted on her. She had swallowed my brace scrapings, and it was all my fault. Needless to say, after the first appointment, Sheila never returned. Apparently, I was a dead, boring, useless model and made terrible tea, most of which, I must admit, I had brought her myself. So now I approach in hair shirt and on penitent knee, begging absolution, not from Richard, whose statement became a self-fulfilling prophecy, because his tea was made up of 30% brace content from that day onwards. No, I must beg forgiveness, firstly from the scrumptious Sheila, who certainly did not deserve the dental cocktail she received instead of tea. And secondly, most importantly, I seek forgiveness from the horrified hairdressers of Hair by Masoni, who struggled womanfully for several months to conceal a style of haircut not to be seen on the streets of Newcastle until Jim Carrey arrived on Dumb and Dumber several decades later. So, Caring Collective, can you possibly forgive me so that I and my perfectly aligned gnashers can now move on without any sense of shame? Well, we've had this kind of thing before, but it's always quite entertaining when these kind of things happen. An interesting story of revenge which went wrong, so let that be a lesson to you. What do you say, Sister
Well,
Rebecca?
it wasn't intentional to get the brace stuff in Sheila's tea, so
No, it
and
should
a
have gone in
few
Richard's tea.
digestives can't really have harmed her, and other stuff can't really have done much long-term harm, even though it probably tasted disgusting. Richard sounds like a charmer, doesn't he? Well, I think he got his just desserts by having the regular treatment in his tea. So I think the fact that Sheila probably wasn't harmed by it all means I'm going to forgive.
What do you think, Sister Bobby, from the Priory?
Yeah, it's easy, really. It's almost victimless. And as for wanting forgiveness
It's
from all the
almost
hedges...
victimless, apart from the fact that Sheila swallowed saliva and digestive...
She didn't know,
dis-
though, so she's not going to really struggle. And, of course, she's not really going to catch anything. It's not going to really affect
What
her.
if Wavy Davy had an illness?
He was fine, wasn't he? He was absolutely fine. And also the hairdressers that benefited afterwards for all the work. You know, any bad haircut is a hairdresser's dream, I think. So absolutely forgiven on all fronts.
Speaking of which...
Oh, funny.
Brother Matthew.
Yeah, no point in getting on our high horses here because no one's getting poisoned here, and also we'd have all done it. We'd have all done it if we'd have been. If you don't think you're going to get caught, you definitely do that. If someone was taking the mickey out your brace, you definitely dunk it in their tea. So I am definitely going to forgive, and particularly for getting a reference to pulp in there as well. Well done. Definitely going to forgive.
You've done something similar, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Of course.
Yes, I
You're
have.
all right, Rebecca. You're looking a little pale.
I feel a bit sick, actually, after that confession.
Tonight's confession, which comes from Sally. Thank you very much indeed, Father Simon. Following your numerous tales of sibling revenge, here's my tale from 1973. I have never explained this to my family until now. It's one of those.
very good.
Always like that. It's back in the early 70s, and growing up as a young girl in suburbia was good. I liked it. Until twin brothers Michael and Stephen entered my world. Of course, they were sweet, I suppose, and I love them to bits, I suppose, but their arrival turned the house upside down. Before they arrived, I had my own girly bedroom with my dolls and books and toys all over the place, and room to play my doll games with my friends when they came round. As we only had 3 bedrooms, my other brother, Philip, had to move out of his room into mine to make way for the twins. This caused, as you can imagine, many fights between myself and Philip, as I resented my space being taken over by his cars and his action men and his Airfix models and the like, and not being able to have my friends in there to play, as with 2 beds there wasn't actually any room left. So early in December, this is when I was 10 and Philip was 7, after one of our many fights, he decided, this is my brother Philip, he decided that he would restyle my Cindy doll's hair by cutting it into tufts about 1/4 inch long. Now, you need to know Cindy was my pride and my joy. Well loved, played with all the time, and I was devastated as my world revolved around Cindy. I would be an outcast at school, as I wouldn't be welcome to join the Cindy groups in the playground. I begged and pleaded with my parents to replace her, but money was tight at that time of year, so no joy there, facing a miserable life for the foreseeable future. Without Cindy, I carefully planned my revenge attack. Cindy actually sounds as though she looked a bit like Matt does at the moment. Imagine that, having hair
haircuts,
1/4 of an inch long.
Brilliant. Okay.
Christmas would soon be here, so I dug out an old tape recorder, and with my best Father Christmas voice, well, the best a 10-year-old girl can manage, I recorded a message. I think it was a good message. It was a strong message, and I hoped it would work. So Christmas Eve, when the house was quiet and all except me was sleeping, I went over to Philip's stocking and I emptied it of the orange, the notebook, and the other gifts, hiding them in my bed and carefully replacing the stocking. I gently nudged Philip to wake him up, and then I switched on the tape recorder. So this is a 10-year-old girl doing Father Christmas, but I'll just do Father Christmas if that's all right.
Yeah, go on.
But in a slightly scary
10-year-old way.
Philip.
What? Right, okay.
Oi. Bad Philip, you've been a naughty boy this year.
It's Ray Winston.
Oh,
of Father Christmas.
yeah, it is. Sorry,
I'm liking Ray.
Especially when you ruined your sister Cindy doll. You do not deserve any presents from me this year. Do not open the curtains, as I don't want to see such a naughty boy. Not now, not ever.
Not ever. It's all about the
This is Santa, remember. Just picture Santa in your head if you can.
The curtain bit was added as the tape recorder was on, just on the windowsill behind the curtains. I also added a few knocks on the window for the recording for extra effect. Well, let me tell you, Father Son, Philip's sleepy face soon had a look of horror on it, and then his screams rang out across the house. Sobbing his 7-year-old heart out, he went running into our parents' bedroom, which then gave me the chance to replace all the items in his stocking and remove the tape recorder from the windowsill. In the meantime, my twin brothers, Michael and Stephen, were now awake too. Mum comforted Philip, telling him it was just a bad dream, but Philip wouldn't have any of it and said, "It wasn't a dream, I've actually seen my stocking was empty and hers was full." When Mum had calmed him down and brought him back to bed, she saw the full stocking and showed Philip and told him again it was just a bad dream. Many a time I have almost confessed, but the thought of what trauma I put Philip through and the rest of the family through that night fills me with shame. As all the names are real, I am hoping that Philip, Stephen or Michael will remember that Christmas Eve back in 1973, says Sally, and forgive me from the bottom of their hearts. Anyway, I like a bit of sibling rivalry. We always like a bit of sisterly revenge. And it was obviously a very nasty thing that brother did to Cindy Doll. But maybe all's fair. What do you think, Sister
It was a nasty thing that he did to her doll, and I think it was quite clever because she inserted this subliminal message in his brain saying, "Do not damage my Cindy dolls again," and he didn't even realise it. I mean, I bet he never went near any of her toys after that. So I think, the original crime was bad enough to warrant that, and I'm going to forgive you, Sally.
Oi, Philip. You leave your Cindy doll alone. Shut it. Anyway, Novice, what do you think?
She's not out on remand or anything like that, is she? No, you don't want it. The lesser tufted Cindy. I mean, how would Philip, or Stupid Philip as he's going to be known from now on, feel if she'd taken his Action Man or hidden the grenades from his Johnny 7 or something like that? It was a
Johnny
horrible
7.
thing.
I wanted a Johnny 7. That was the...
that's wrong era, that. Sure, I don't remember Johnny 7.
Johnny 7 was a gun with 7 guns.
Oh, it's amazing.
7 guns?
Yeah.
It was a 7-gun gun.
7-gun gun.
It had bullets, it had grenades, it had parachutes. It was fantastic. I had one. I was
Parachute
really impressed.
on a gun?
Yeah, well, it did on the version that I got.
This gun.
It was, look, I'm the youngest of 3. It was third hand by the time I got
Camera
it.
and a radio and a bike and wings you could fly in it.
Anger. Go on.
But stupid Philip has never twigged to this day that he was imagining. He wasn't actually imagining the voices; they were really there.
He was
so
only 7.
there you go. Yeah, well, there you go. You've got to mature at some stage. So I say, Sally out on remand, absolutely forgiven.
Okay, what do you say then?
I think this is an inspired act of revenge from Sally. And also, I didn't hear Philip facing any repercussions for lopping off the hair of this Cindy doll, and the parents appear to be fine with that. So, yes, absolutely forgiven, no problem.
Well, they were this week's confessions. Pretty fabulous. Who did you forgive? And if something in your soul is stirring, if you think there's something you need to unburden yourself, I think there probably is. Confessions at bbc.co.uk. More in a week, and the Weekly Mayo available to download right now.
BBC